Welcome back to the Mastering Runeterra podcast with Jay and Bay, the number one source for competitive Legends of Runeterra news and information. If you're looking for the best decks to play right now, be sure to check us out on Twitter at Master Runeterra or in our Discord. And if you want to take the next step in leveling up your game, check out our Runeterra team on Patreon, where we do weekly learning calls and one-on-one coaching. Now strap in and grab yourself some Boro snacks, because we are about to start Mastering Runeterra.
Welcome back to the Mastering Runeterra podcast with Jay, Bay, and Rubinzoo. We have a fantastic episode for you today. But before we jump into that, we of course have to thank all of our patrons who help support us and bring you guys awesome content like this podcast. And we, of course, have to thank our sister podcast, Runeterra Radio, Saucy and Blevins. Love you guys. So, this is actually our first time having a guest on the show. Welcome, Rubin. Thank you so much for joining us. For those who don't know, Rubin is a game designer at LoR. And, like, I gotta say, for, like, Bay and I, and, like, people that came from the Magic world, you're our guy. You're, like, Pro Tour champion, game designer at Runeterra, and you crush the ladder and break metas. Like, we're just trying to do one of like maybe any of those, and like here you are just stomping all three. So for anyone that needed an introduction, that's Rubin in a nutshell.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm super excited. Like I didn't know that people loved all the work that I do so much. So it's good to hear from people that way. I do sometimes I do crush people on ladder, I guess you could say. It's normally on accident, though. I swear I'm not out here just crushing people's dreams to get to seasonals and stuff. And normally, like, I've been playing more in the beginning of the season, so I'm not, like, just, LP mongering and stuff and gatekeeping.
Yeah, I feel like you've been hitting, like, rank 1 or, like, top 10 or something in the beginning, in the first, like, few weeks. And then you kind of just stop playing.
It's actually funny because when LoR first launched, we basically like had a rule where like we wouldn't really play for the first week or two because we just kind of wanted to let players like play with stuff. Mm-hmm. And I always liked that because then I don't I never really wanted to accidentally overly impact the meta, which maybe I've done recently a lot. But because we introduced like seasonal points and like ladder points, all of a sudden it kind of flipped where it's like, oh, actually I should probably, if I do play more, it should probably be at the beginning of the season when I'm not like just kind of like beating people for really no personal gain. Yeah.
Incoming Reddit thread, I got knocked out of Worlds by Steve Rubin. Yeah, that would feel pretty bad.
Yeah, so I've been, I haven't actually played it in a few weeks. I've generally been playing at the beginning of seasons now.
So for those of you who don't know, Rubinzoo created the Zoe Vi deck that we saw so popular last season, and everyone's favorite Sivir Zed deck this season.
That's fun.
I mean that deck was a total accident. I just was playing like I was Diamond Platinum 4 because of like the ladder reset, and I was just trying random stuff out. And I was just like looking at this like pot, like all these cards that got buffed. And then I eventually ended up just building that deck and just crushing everybody. I don't know. What have I done? And then Akshan came out, which probably made things worse. I don't know. But it happens. I guess.
Does happen.
Yeah.
It does happen. So not my favorite list. I remember seeing it and I was looking at it. And we have the term Rubin pile for a reason. I feel like a lot of your decks have like so many 1-ofs and like 2-ofs. It just looks like a bunch of cards slammed together and then they just work really well. Like Flurry and Ghost in a Sivir deck. Once you play it the first time, you're like, oh, like I get it now. This makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the first pile was mostly that I feel like players played a lot of Zoe without actually maximizing her. Like I just wanted to... The 1-ofs was more of a, like, this is a Zoe / the Percival deck, and it's like, oh, like, my Zoe is just going to level up on round 6 if you don't kill it in this deck, which is obviously game-winning, so that was kind of the... I think the Sivir Akshan deck was more of, like, a clean list, or sorry, I guess it was
definitely
Sivir
more clean,
Zed.
yeah.
And yeah, it was one of those situations where you're just like, when you just have a deck and you're not really that confident in it, and then you're just like crushing people, and you're like, holy cow, like we broke it. Like that's like literally what I thought. Like I was just crushing everybody. I even played. I even like iterated down to a list that was really good against like the meta had a lot of like a Zero Aurelia and like Lurk. So I just had like Bukai Reaper in there just as like a really good card against both those decks to get early game. Obviously, I think people like eventually it made the deck a lot better over time, but definitely was a moment where I'm like, holy crap. And then also I was like, oh, this sucks. Now that I saw that everybody kind of picked up on it, I was like, what have I done? Now we're gonna have to figure out how to eventually fix this, because definitely the whole like spell shield plus buffs is super powerful. But at first it was funny because I just combined like quick attack plus vulnerable and spell shield, and everyone's like, wow, this is a genius deck. And I'm just like, is it? Like I just kind of like, saw buffed cards and saw some very basic synergies and got there. But anyway, I don't know how much we need to talk about that, but it definitely is a cool deck. Really like that one.
It is cool. Yeah, I was a big fan of it when it like came out, right? Or when it like rose to popularity. I was like, this is a cool idea. And then afterwards I liked it less.
The novelty wore off at some point. Yeah,
I totally know what you mean though, by like that feeling of when you're like, oh, this is it. For the Magic players out there, that's how I felt when Treasure Cruise got released. The Delve Draw 3. I remember day one putting 3 of them in my deck because I love nothing more than drawing cards, and just stomping everyone with like a horrible deck list. And I was like, wait a second, this is disgusting. This is way too good.
I had that with Six's Revelation. When it came out, it was like a 25-cent mythic, and I had it like in limited or something. I just won the game immediately. I was like, put it in my constructed deck, and just like won the game immediately. I was like, I think we should invest in these. I think we should buy them like a month later. They're like $50 cards. But yeah, that card was busted. Rubin, tell us a little bit about your deck building and stuff. I am not a good deck builder at all. That is not my strong suit when it comes to games. So I'm very envious of people like yourself that are. I'm curious though, like, you happened upon this Sivir list. There's been past decks that you've made as well that have been very good. How many decks like get tossed away? Like for each like nugget of gold like this, like, are you talking like 10 decks, 100 decks? Like how much are you brewing?
Honestly, I think maybe I'm just running good, but it's not that much brewing. It's more of like an iterating down process. I remember for the Akshan Sivir deck in particular, for the Sivir Zed deck. I keep calling it Akshan Sivir, but it was Sivir Zed.
It's the same.
I kind of like, was just playing. I was playing with different like Shurima decks. I think at one point I had like a Lulu and Shurima like combo where I was just being aggressive with like vulnerable units. And then I just basically realized that like Twin Disciplines and like Rune Runner are both just kind of like make it really hard for a lot of decks to compete with you on many levels. And that's when I kind of quickly discovered that we can play Sivir, and then of course I want to play like Flurry of Fists with Young Witch. So it all happened very fast. Even maybe like you could go on Runeterra AR and like see how it worked. But generally, I'm more of a like person that takes a deck and tunes it. I mean, I guess for Runeterra, there's just so many different decks that I think it's pretty easy for like. I shouldn't say it's easy, but it's definitely a likely scenario where you take kind of an underused archetype. And you kind of go down on it. So there's not that much brewing, but I kind of like to go off the beaten path in lore, generally because I think that we have a lot of different decks, and oftentimes there's like undiscovered stuff. In this case, I saw some people like saying on Reddit, like, oh, he clearly like built this deck and like had it like ready to go and just crush people. And it's just like, no, I just like looked at, I was just trying to get out of Platinum, and I was like, well, look at all these like Young Witch and Twin Disciplines were buffed. Let's try them out and stuff like that. And Sivir was buffed too. So I just threw all the buffed cards into a deck, and it was a deck. So maybe I got lucky there. Definitely has a lot of synergy in it. So I think that generally like my decks are pretty synergy driven. Like with like Vi and Zoe, which was originally like was originally Zoe and Victor. And then this deck, like I don't know, I'm not brewing that often, but I think. Somebody pointed out, I saw this in like a Reddit or Twitter comment where like, yeah, a lot of players build decks from like what the existing meta is, but since like Rubin is a dev, he actually just kind of like looks at things that are good and like synergizes and play them together. And I think that sorry, I don't remember who made that comment, but I think it's actually a pretty fair assessment. Which like, I'm not worried about like okay, like the Watcher deck exists. I'm actually saying like, okay, what was recently buffed or recently released that has like good synergies. So yeah, I'm definitely a tuner, not a brewer. Maybe it seems like I'm some sort of crazy brewer, but I mostly like to take a deck and kind of iterate down on it.
That's an interesting one because that like I feel like we definitely do that where we look at the meta and we go, okay, this is pretty good. What if we like tweak it a little bit, or like, all right, yeah, we have to watch out for Watcher, or like, well, we can't play this because they can't beat Sivir, like that kind of stuff. We don't just. It's hard to approach a format from like a just like in a vacuum, you know, just be like, okay, what's like just naturally very strong, and I feel like that's when you run into these like very, very, very strong lists, like the Sivir list, where you just look at like, okay, what cards are really, really good and work really well together, and then you just end up doing something more powerful than everyone else because you're not worried about what they're doing. You're just like better. You're just stronger.
Yeah, just doing other powerful stuff for sure.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely a big crux where like I'm not good at that. I'm not good at just looking at like just finding some little nugget like, oh hey, this looks powerful. All I can see is like all the ways something's like not doing well because it's not currently doing well. I'll have to try doing that, especially when the new cards come out. I think that's a really good point. When things are buffed or nerfed or like the meta all moves around, it really shakes. I mean, with the kind of cards that we saw like in the last patch, like that's some significant changes. And I feel like I don't know, maybe it's just me, but like on the surface, I'm like, okay, Twin Disciplines cost one less. It's not that big of a deal, right? Like, oh wait, card's absolutely bonkers now. Like one mana makes a huge difference. One stat line, like power toughness, makes a huge difference. And yeah, I feel like I need to iterate more or just try things out more when those patches first happen. But yeah, I know you play like a lot of the decks early. I'm just like a meta slave. I'm just like grab what's ever good, go try to climb the ladder. But I think I'm doing myself a disservice. So for anyone out there that's like me, try the new stuff because it seems like that's where the gems are.
Yeah, I like to jump around. Like to try all the new stuff at least once. You'd be hard pressed to find a deck I haven't played at least like a couple games on. The deck I've been playing a bit recently though is speaking of new stuff, is the Akshan Infinite Combo. Have you tried that, Rubin, at all?
I haven't like tried it. I've seen it being played a lot, and I think people were kind of shocked. I think I tweeted this a while ago that like Akshan definitely has like Fount of Power. Basically says on it like try to break me, and it's definitely it's definitely intended that you can do it. And mostly that we're hoping that it's pretty hard to achieve or like very disruptible. You know, I haven't been following it. When it first came out, we were all following it really closely. Like, okay, what are the win rates? Like, what are the play rates? Like, what's going on? So yeah, I haven't played it that much. I've played like decks in dev testing that had like, you know, the Promising Future plus Akshan or like Talia plus Akshan. I played a lot of Talia plus Akshan. I don't know if anybody's really played that on live since it seems better to go like more all in on like having the combo and having like Ionian stuff. But yeah, I'm pretty familiar with it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. You can't really play it on ladder because it takes about 30 minutes to win. Like, I think if you have all the stuff and you combo like as soon as possible, it takes maybe 20, 15 if you're lucky. And so like it's really tough to play on ladder, and most of your opponents will just rope you. They'll just rope you like every turn, and you're like, oh my god, please just let me concede. I've won the game. So tough to play on ladder. We are seeing it a little bit in tournaments, which brings up something I wanted to talk about because it does some weird stuff with the tournament clock.
Oh yes,
because animations we tested this. Yeah, animations take up your opponent's clock, not your own. And then the more font of power, I think this is called, the draw to make your things cheaper, the more font of powers you cast, the slower the game goes. Okay. Because I think it has to think about everything like one more time or something. So the animations take a little longer, which means that every time I cast my spell or whatever, and I flicker my things infinite to draw my cards and set up my combo, it drains my opponent's player clock faster than it will drain my own, even if they have auto pass off or a mashing spacebar.
Right.
Which is just a weird thing to happen because we don't have a chess clock.
Yeah, it's a bit unfortunate. It's definitely a bug of we're aware of the like my animations cause you to like lose time. Like I've talked to the PTI team about it, and we're trying to prioritize a fix. I don't think it's going to be like in for, of course, seasonals like this weekend.
Yeah, it's like
but yeah, it's definitely something that we're monitoring and we absolutely like need to address. So it is definitely a bug that the turn timers are being consumed when your opponent's animations are going. It should be their turn timer that's being consumed.
Yeah, which would make sense. But the big question I was getting to, sorry to cut you off, Jason, is there a reason you guys moved away from the classic chess timer? For those of you who aren't aware, chess timer is you have one match timer each, essentially, and it counts down. You each have 25 minutes or whatever, and if you reach 0, you lose the match. Is there a reason you went with the system you have instead?
So I don't have a great answer since I didn't implement it, but I did test the system. Like personally, I think that I would prefer like a chess system like you're talking about because it's just a lot more understandable. I think the reason we went for the system we had was, to be honest, like I would have to ask like the PTI team because they ultimately like made the call on it. I think it does work very similarly to a chess-based system, especially in a world where like everything is like working exactly properly, where we're both consuming time, and then the focus is actually on overtime, where it's like, okay, it's the last game, like both players are kind of forced to play faster. So I think the biggest thing is that I'm pretty sure like the system the way it is incentivizing sort of just like not really thinking about it too much until it's overtime, when it's like, okay, this really matters, and there's kind of this intense moment where players are going back and forth. I think we have made some improvements on the overtime system, if I'm not correct, from like when it was doing some really weird stuff. I can't remember if it was last season or the season before. So yeah, that's pretty much it. But like I said, personally, I do feel like the system is a bit more complicated than it needs to be, and something like a just straight up like we both have an X time bank and we both see it at all times could be a bit better. But yeah, that's just my personal take, obviously.
Yeah. I gotta say though, this feels like one of those examples of something where one of the things I really enjoy about Riot, about Runeterra, and like everything that Riot makes really is that you guys do such a good job of kind of like pushing the envelope. Not just doing what's been done before, but really taking a look at what's been done before and thinking about how you can iterate on it and like do it better. And, sometimes you're going to take a swing and a miss and it's not always going to be better, but a lot of times it is. And so the clock kind of feels that way to me. It feels like they were trying to do some things, like it looks really cool, but like functionally it's like, oh, wait, gamers can kind of manipulate it, and obviously gamers going to game. And so like ended up like maybe not working out quite the way they wanted to or something. But I love that about Riot. I love that. Is that like something I'm interested, kind of like what it's like working there? Because like when you look at other companies, I won't name names, but you can, other gaming companies, or just any company really at all that, they start to have brain drains, and they're just, the corporation gets too big and you can't manage it properly or be efficient. Like there's always issues and stuff. I'm sure Riot has these issues as well, but I'm constantly impressed by how much you guys get right and how much you're able to innovate and how quickly it all happens is also pretty wild to me, because I can only imagine like the amount of people that you need on all of these teams to make all of these things. Like I think we take it for granted quite often as players, just like how beautiful the game is, like all the little things like the art and the voice lines, how all the things interact with each other, like that. There's so much planning and stuff that goes into that. So, I'm just kind of curious, like what it's like a little bit working there, the day to day, the culture. Like, how are you guys able to basically do what you do?
Well, I mean, generally, it's really just to focus on the player. Like, we basically aspire. We say that we like aspire to be the most player focused company in the world, and I think that people we hire with people who buy into that, and oftentimes that means like we want to create what we call genre defining games. And to do that, like we basically need our games to be like worthy of our players' time. And a lot of times in the past, we've actually shied away through making, like smaller games or maybe not necessarily doing a certain R&D project because it's kind of, it wouldn't be like as big as it could be. So we make really big bets when we make games, and the way we win is through like ultimately serving our players more than other game companies do, in my opinion. obviously that it's not all, there's give and take there where it's like, what are you losing when you do this? And what are you gaining when you do this? But in general, I think we all buy into the philosophy that like we want our games to be worth it for players, worthy of their time and investment, and sometimes even their lives, right? Like when players put everything into like League of Legends or like y'all from LoR and stuff like that. And part of that is just always kind of, and this has been something that's interesting for me now that we've been live, because obviously I've worked at Riot for like four and a half years now. So most of my time at Riot, like we were actually an R&D project, and it was really tough because we're making these decisions where we're like, okay, like, is this what players are going to like? Like, we don't know yet. But now, like, that we're a live game and we're a live service, that's really, really difficult, right? Where it's like, oh, we're seeing players, like, experiencing stuff where it's like, oh, could the turn timers be better? Could this or that? Could we implement, like, a different ladder and stuff? And it's like, internally, it's really difficult because we want to deliver, we want to deliver new expansions and new experiences like the Saltwater Scourge. And that means we need to give and take, and we need to sacrifice certain things. And that's kind of how the way that game dev goes. I think that ultimately it's just like the goal of serving players in ways that surprise and delight them, and making sure that players feel heard. I think that's something that we try to focus on, especially on LoR, where it's like we're constantly listening to our community. Which I think that all the game devs kind of feel the same way. But why it's different in Riot is we actually kind of all buy into it in a company, and to the extent where like we're actively looking for people who are interested in this as well. And then when things come up, like you should see some of these fires that are created, and there's all sorts of like conversations on, now we're work from home, so with conversations on Slack with like, oh, there's an Akshan Infinite combo, like, okay, we're gonna get like one of our analysts to like analyze the data. I'm gonna like meet up with her. We're gonna talk to like our interim game director, Dave Guskin. Like, okay, when are we gonna make a hot fix? Something like that. Because I saw like a lot of players saying, "Oh, this needs to be hot fixed immediately" or whatever. And we're like, "Well, we talked to the designers," which was like me. It's like, well, it's intended. But I wish that some people got to see that, because oftentimes like a whole like afternoon might be disrupted if something like that happens, and all of a sudden I need to like pull together our production people and everybody and get everybody on the same page. So anyway, hopefully that was a really long answer, but hopefully that kind of gives you a window of like what it's like to be a Riot dev.
Yeah, no, that was really good. And I gotta say, like, I can feel that. The like player focus, the listening to the community. It's like, again, not naming names, but coming back from other games that we all might have played. It's like it's like shocking almost. Like I'm not used to it. It's like dating someone really good all of a sudden and being like, "Oh, you brought me flowers and like took me out for dinner or something." Like, what is this? Like, we have an issue and you guys listened and then you fixed it and made it better. Like, what? What is that? I don't even. It's like not a thing. Like in so many games and so many genres, like that's just like you just scream at the wall and like that's at the internet,
just yelling into the void.
That's it.
It's
it's yelling into the void and then no one listens. And it's fantastic. And then that's and then it makes, I don't know, me at least, I won't speak for anyone else, but like makes me want to just keep coming back. Because I feel appreciated, I feel heard, I have trust that, not everything's going to be perfect, but that, like, people are listening and that the company is actively trying to make the game better and the experience better. So, a lot of that's ringing through a lot of what you guys are doing. There was something that you touched on that I wanted to loop back around to. Oh, yes. So we were talking about hot fixes. So a couple of things. One, I was surprised that you guys didn't hotfix it. I was curious because I had heard that you guys were against any sort of loop, which is pretty easy. Well, I don't know if it's pretty easy, but it's easy to do, where you just sit there and theoretically on ladder, you could force your opponent to, like, even if you couldn't kill them, you could like infinite loop, and then someone just have to concede. It's like a test of wills. So one, what do you guys think about infinite loops and stuff? And then two, also, is there what are your thoughts about having a system so that eventually, if someone's taking a certain amount of time, like the rope starts going and it like skips their turn or as some sort of ending?
Yeah, so this is actually a good question. I'm glad that we're looping back, so I don't get like flamed by everybody that's just saying like everything is totally K. I would say that the current iteration of like the Akshan Infinite Loop, like generally, when we looked at whether we're going to hotfix it, we looked at the data, we looked at like player reports, We looked at how severe the problem was essentially over the weekend, and then decided on some action plans, and I can talk about that in a bit. But what we're generally, I would say, is that infinite loot, like what Akshan is doing with Founts of Power, is really something that hasn't. There are a lot of players out there who really love combo decks, right? Like I think like Mark Rosemond will call them like Jenny or Johnny type players who like are really into that. Something that LoR hasn't really had. Like, yeah, we've had some smooth soloist like nonsense, but generally we haven't had that much of it. I think even was it Majin or somebody tweeted like, I think you tweeted like, oh, I really, or I hope this stays, but it's very clearly going to be like hot fixed or patched.
Yeah, I think I tweeted almost exactly that.
So there definitely is an audience. I know that, of course, Swim is like combo deck master, always trying to like do crazy combo decks. So even within like the people you see in our community that are very, very, very vocal, like we have a lot of combo players. So I think that serving those players is kind of important. In general, like this has been something that a lot of digital card games have struggled with. Like you talk about like Magic Online and like certain decks like you can't play. Like, oh, I went to the Magic Online Championship Series one year. So like I'm playing with 24 of the best players. It's like, well, can I play with a certain deck because I can't actually execute that combo? I think that for us, we actually have kind of established that loops, are not necessarily the most healthy thing when you can take infinite actions, right? And with spells, actually, we implemented, this might be more of a band-aid than a permanent solution, but we actually implemented a 15 spell limit, which if you try to cast the same spell 15 times in a row, you won't be able to cast it anymore. And we are actually interested in, I'm not going to reveal exactly when or how, but I think we're going to extend that to units as well. That way, like, you'll only be able to use the Navori Conspirator loop 15 times. It's a bit of an interesting subject because, like, does that kill the deck? Does it not kill the deck? Like, we'll have to do some testing and like figure it out. But in general, we are pro combo, given it's a bit healthier than it is now. So it's gonna be tough. Like I think a lot of players might be kind of disappointed in that answer. But I guess what I'd say from a top level is that we do want combos to exist. We want to serve these kind of combo players. Our systems right now are not really up to snuff in terms of like, having these combos. Like luckily, like the Akshan, that specific deck right now is like not played so much and doesn't win so much, so it's okay. But at any given moment, if that became like 30% of the meta, like sometimes decks do, that could be a problem. So we are planning around that. But yeah, so in general, that's my answer, is that combo good, but maybe not exactly like how it interacts with our system right now. Like I think Jason mentioned, like maybe there should be some sort of like you're like roping where it's like, okay, at a certain point you need to like kind of advance the game state. But yeah, that's how I feel about it. I think the good news, and hopefully I'm not going to eat my words here. Maybe I won't even say it, but I will say it, is that like generally the Fount of Power deck is just totally winning once you get a few founts. But I talked to Rattling Bones, who was like the aficionado, and he did tell me that there are situations where you kind of get 2 conspirators, but you don't actually have.
Yeah, but you can't actually win. Mm-hmm.
You can't actually win, and it's kind of weird versus a paper card game where you could just like reveal like, oh, I have it or I don't, or like, then that's where I think putting the unit cap limit is going to be important. Like we have with spells, where it's like, well, if you're not actually advancing the game and winning, like your opponent can't see that you're doing it, so they're not conceding, right? And then it's like you're going to have to do something else at some point other than play Navori Conspirator over and over again. So I'm hoping that helps. I don't think that's going to be in, of course, for like this seasonal, but definitely that is our at least solution that we've come up with for now, and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. That combo's like okay in the realm of Runeterra, because I love combo. It's my favorite archetype. And like I said in my tweet, I want the deck to stay, but like as it stands, I don't think it's okay. And the reason for that is, like Bones said, is that you could infinite someone out without actually being able to kill them ever. And the way that the clock works, because we talked about that a second ago, is I can win my match without ever being able to win the game. Because I can just force you to concede or you lose on time. Will that happen? No. It's so hard to get that to happen. Like you have to essentially like combo off without being able to combo off, and it's like not gonna happen often. But it just needs to happen once in seasonals, just to cause like a fire,
just to be clear, I totally agree. Like it's definitely some amount of problem right now, because it's like, well, I'm forced to just concede maybe during a seasonal match. Even if they haven't shown me, like, I don't even know what it's like, a ribbon dancer, or it's just like playing a million elusives. Like
it's ribbon dancer, or you actually don't need it. You can just because you can trigger the Akshan thing as many times as you want, so you can just
I was just
plus
gonna say
people to a
classic
spell shield,
combo deck, like people
kill
just
them,
playing a random
Zillion
card
Bomb.
for no reason.
It literally whatever you want. Yeah, you can win however you want.
But yeah, I just
There's a
wanted
bunch
to
of
emphasize that since it seemed like I was saying a lot.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah,
No, I
this
get
is
it.
we like combo, we love combo, and probably there'll be memes, but it's definitely something we need to address. And whether it should have been a hotfix or not is definitely like a topic for a different day, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to just stick on that for a bunch. So, how about we pivot to something else I want to talk about? Seasonals. It's coming up. Figured we'd
Tomorrow, no big deal.
2 days.
As of this release.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I was like, what? Yeah. So tomorrow. So seasonals was big for both Jason and I. We didn't play Runeterra until seasonals was actually announced. We saw the big announcement where it said, "Hey, path to pro," and kind of still sat on it until actual seasonals was announced and said, "Okay, this looks like what we want to get into. Like, this is a great step in the right direction." Now it's time. Like, now I'm down to play Runeterra. So is that like, how did you guys come up with the idea of seasonals? What was like? Can you just walk me through that? Like,
Yeah, I'm trying to remember because it seems like kind of like something
been a
that's
bit
kind of
ago, huh?
obvious. But yeah, I mean, in general, we knew that we wanted some sort of system that would give players a competitive outlet. I'm really happy to hear that like y'all love it because it's definitely, I would definitely say that seasonals is actually more of a like experience. It's good for competitive players, but it's also just good for any type of player that is looking to like a little bit more out of whatever game they play. I know that like League of Legends has Clash. We have like seasonals that actually has cash prizes, which is awesome. So I'm glad to hear that y'all love it. But basically the thought process was like, we do want some level of competitive tournaments. We do want like actual in-client ability for players to play tournaments, since I think that is something that is often pretty deprioritized because like it's normally affecting such a small segment of your player base. But when it comes back to like Riot's mission of like creating games that are just worthwhile for players to play for like literally 10 years, we needed some sort of OP system. And at first, we just had, well, we're going to let this be kind of like League of Legends where we allow grassroots tournament organizers to do stuff, because that's essentially like the League of Legends model, where it's like eventually there'll be enough demand for it and then we can support it. And in our case, like we did that with seasonal tournaments. So yeah, that's the very basic thinking there. I don't know if that's a good answer or not, but pretty much like needed something for competitive players and our top level players to sort of prove themselves, give themselves some progression, and also just feel like it's a worthwhile endeavor,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like we do love seasonals, and the reason seasonals was a hook wasn't just because of seasonals. It was just a step in the direction we wanted to see, right? And the big tagline for us, like I mentioned, was, I think the article was titled like "A Path to Pro" or something, and we went, okay, this is a game that I think I can really enjoy. I love the League of Legends IP, and I want to play competitively. Like I don't play a game to not play competitively, usually, at least in card games. And so, yeah, I was so excited to see that, and I was like, okay, step in the right direction. And then after the first couple seasonals, we sat there and we're like, we really need something else. We're like, we really need something bigger. Seasonals, like you said, is like great, and it's good for us competitive players, but it's not incredibly competitive, right?
It's not a pro tour.
It's not a pro tour, yeah.
Yeah, it's closer to a Grand Prix. Like it's
Yes, that is the analogy we made before. Perfect. And so we were like, okay, it's good, but it's not great. Hopefully something else. And then boom, Worlds. Mm-hmm. And we're like, this is what we want.
Nice.
We're like,
good.
Yes, we have ladder matters, right? Seasonals matter. Even if I don't spike a seasonal, I can still make it just off consistent performance. Like this is so great. Did you, when you started from seasonals, did you have a plan to like have bigger and better things? Because it wasn't that like huge of a gap. It was 4 months after the first seasonal and Worlds announcement. It was only like 4 months or something.
Honestly,
Okay,
I don't know exactly. Like the Play Together guys, Paul Heron and Keen Tan are like definitely in charge of that. I don't know exactly if it was like we're budgeting this much for seasonals versus, but I think that like you actually said, I think they're actually for two different audiences. Like seasonals are the thing. Like we get 1,000 players in each seasonal. We really wanted to kind of extend the tournament experience out to like players who probably a lot of them have never even played in something like that or a tournament before. Having like, I think it's like 1,000 people from 4 different regions. So it's like, it's like huge, right? We're getting people from all over the world. A lot of them who might have qualified through gauntlets or like been masters for the first time. So we're definitely appealing to the masses where hopefully it feels very attainable for a lot of different players, where Worlds is the more selective, like, okay, we are going to provide something for hyper-focused players who want to consider themselves pros, or players who, like yourselves, who are content creators or who are very focused in, like, the tournament scene. So Worlds was definitely almost like a, taking that seasonal system that's built for so many people and kind of hyper-focusing it, while at the same time, all of a sudden, making seasonal just more competitive, right? Because now all of a sudden, seasonal to seasonal matters.
Really want to win it, yeah.
So now all of a sudden, those players who might not have been interested in seasonals before because they just want to like win big tournaments, now it's like, okay, now the seasonals matter a lot. And hopefully there's a lot of cool, battles between people within your region, and you'll probably see the same names. And then I'm just so excited for Worlds because all the 4 regions are gonna consolidate down, and then you're gonna have like your champion, like your America's person that you get to like root for, and they're gonna go and I don't know if we reveal the format yet, but they're gonna go and definitely fight people from other regions. Definitely going to be super intense. Both the the regional qualifier for Worlds and Worlds, just to give you that feeling of the ultimate sort of like tournament where the people who make the top 16 or top 8 of Worlds are going to be like the best of the best from your region, and that's kind of what we run, right? Like focusing on that, while that also still being attainable for like your everyday player.
So speaking about like labs and stuff, there's a couple of things I want to ask you about. One person had from our Discord had asked me to ask you about any sort of like social interaction kind of strategies that you guys might have. Just like ways, because like Magic the Gathering is all about like meeting the friends and like hanging out more than it is like playing the game online stuff. Yeah, the gathering they talk about. But being able to do that like in online. So for instance, you guys came out with the 2 versus 2 lab not long ago. I thought that was really cool. I thought that was because Magic has tried to make team events and they've never really worked. They had a 2-headed try-in event and like, it didn't work. And they have like 3-person teams. You can't use the same cards. But it's like, you're never really on a team. You're just facing someone else and there's restrictions on the cards you can play. But this, you had like resources that you had to divvy amongst you and your teammate, and like they did the same. And it felt like it could be like a real format to me. Being able to communicate with the emotes and stuff, I thought was hilarious and fun. So I was curious, sort of what you guys, again, I don't know if you can't reveal too much that's coming down the pipe, but is that something that you're looking to do to make like other formats like this? Also, I'll piggyback onto that. Expedition. Like is there like any thoughts on like limited formats? Because I love draft. All true Magic players love draft. Majin Bay. Bay doesn't like draft. So expedition, like Magic type drafts. Just what can you talk about sort of in that vein of other formats and maybe social interactions?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of social, like, we know for sure that social is really important, and the Labs team is, so not the team that I'm working on, but they're also in gameplay. The Labs team is definitely working on future social modes. I think it's fair to say that. I've gotten so many messages from random people, like where did the 2v2 mode go? Like, even people that didn't even know, like, played our game. Like, I had a friend Raj who like DM'd me on Twitter like, hey, like my brother's getting back into the game. I'm trying to get him into the game, but where did this 2v2 mode go? And I didn't even know that he played.
So
and I was
funny.
Just like, yeah, and I was just like, oh, like yeah, we're definitely thinking about that. And he gave me the thumbs up emoji on that DM. So, but anyway, just goes to show that like players, especially people that you don't really expect, like are looking to share the game with others and have those sort of shared experiences where they get to play with their friends or against their friends. And we definitely know that. I can't reveal exactly anything that we're doing, but we are looking to develop more modes that are like that, which is part of the whole shtick of Labs, is that we were just kind of experimenting and seeing what stuck. And it seemed like Lab of Legends and like the 2v2 mode were like among the most popular things. And now Labs is like kind of, we're putting more resources into it than ever to try to figure out, okay, what is that eventually going to kind of come into? And I think that they're definitely working on that pretty hard. In terms of like expeditions and stuff, I think there are a lot of step forwards we've made with Lab of Legends and Saltwater Scourge, and we are looking to continue to build on that. We definitely believe, actually, that one of the things that surprised us, I think, is how popular just PvE modes are. Even y'all saying that you like the modes is kind of crazy because you're not that you're not the target audience, but the fact that some of our most competitive players are like, hey, I actually really like doing this thing, definitely makes me feel a lot better because we are interested in expanding on that. And we're going to do that in new ways in the future. Of course, I can't reveal anything about that now, but definitely know that we are looking to even further push those type of labs modes as well as potentially like social modes.
I think my favorite part of labs is it's some of them are almost like a power fantasy type thing where you get to do the busted thing. Like that's what Lab of Legends is like. It's like I get to do all the disgusting, stupid combos that like you'd never be able to do, and I love that part. I actually had a different experience than you, Jason, with the 2v2 format. I was not a fan of it. It felt like I was playing next to someone else, but I couldn't hear them. We would just every now and then look at each other and like wave, and then go back to our own game. That's how it felt like to me. So yeah, I would love to see more interaction. I know that's really tough in an online card game where you don't have like a chat function or anything. I have no idea how anyone would accomplish this. I imagine that's the $1 million question. But I really like the direction the PvE modes are going. I think I've been surprised with how much I like some of them. Because like I said, not a fan. I do think poor Expedition gamers are probably just like, yo, may I have some more Expedition stuff, please?
I would love to play Expedition. Expedition is the draft, right? I'm not confusing this?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. I would love to play more. I played a little bit when I first got into it. I love limited formats. But again, it's just like there's nothing there for me to play for. Is there talk
if you have all the cards, right? There's like a bunch of like XP bonuses and stuff. Yeah,
I'm talking from like a competitive spike. I want to qualify for Worlds. I want to win money. I want to win prestige. I want to win.
Like
show I'm the best. Yeah, or even just like a ladder. Is there any talk of like of revamping it or doing it differently? Because like Expedition's like pretty unique, or somewhat unique in the limited space.
Yeah, I mean, we're still putting some work into it. Like, I myself did all the archetypes for the Bandle City expansion, so they'll definitely be in. Like,
those are like the buckets,
in terms of
where you pick. The...
Yeah, the buckets. In terms of a ranked mode, like I think there was talks very early on around it, but ultimately we went like the way that a lot of I guess games end up going and being like our constructed formats or like what are going to be our organized play is going to be around. I think that if we ever saw some sort of crazy uptick or support from our player base or need for it, we definitely could create the ranked ladder. But right now, there's definitely not like at least that I'm aware of a plan to make a ranked ladder for Expeditions.
I'm not sure there's enough of a player base to support it. There are a lot of people that play Expeditions, but they tend to not be the competitive player base. In my
it's just weird though because it's like it's a chicken and the egg thing though because potentially like
there's no
if
reason
ranked
for
was our Expeditions mode, then maybe like everybody except Modrin would play that competitively.
That's right,
and he wouldn't play our game.
All the cool people.
But yeah, I mean it's kind of a situation where I think we're always willing to adapt, and right now I don't see exactly like I'm not a producer, so I'm not making these type of calls, but I don't exactly see the huge benefit of making some sort of new Expeditions like ranked mode, though it's definitely something that we've considered in the past, which means if something's been considered in the past, like we will always want to potentially revisit it if the time is right.
Yeah, I have a huge question, not a huge question, a question that's a big leap from anything we've been talking about. If we're
that's great. Honestly, if we can go away from like game modes and stuff, maybe talk about other stuff.
So real quick, did you know? With the big balance patch, with the changes you made to specifically Targon, was the plan to just kill the region? Because that's what it felt like.
Right, definitely, baby. Well, definitely not. I mean, and I think if anybody has proven this, I'm gonna be the best person to be able to confidently say is like just if you don't see something on Mobalytics, it doesn't actually mean that that's not something that's good. And I'm hoping anyway in the seasonal. I don't know. We'll see if people play it or not. But if it's not played at all, we'll definitely consider doing some reversions. When we looked at those buffs specifically, like, and I think we outlined this a bit, but it's always hard for players to keep track of this stuff. Is that we were looking at some of the strengths of regions and weaknesses of regions, like particularly I think Bilgewater's like strengths, like doing AOE and stuff like that wasn't really that well and Ionia being sort of like tricky and having good recall spells. But in Targon's case, their strengths like healing and early board, they're things that were supposed to be strengths like healing were so strong that it kind of eradicated their weaknesses of like being bad early game and not having actual removal spells.
Being pretty mana inefficient.
Not
and everything.
Right, and I think that I'm actually happy with where everything landed. It's funny because we personally talked a lot about the Fangs, like whether we should nerf it or not, and I was definitely like, we probably don't need to do this, but from a fundamental perspective, like if our goal is to make it so that their ability to deal with early game pressure and their ability to like just kind of ignore it through healing, if we don't actually hit that goal, then the change list is not going to be as successful. So in that case, in retrospect, I'm actually pretty happy with where it landed. I think that, it's totally, I don't want to say for sure, since I generally believe players on this one when they like go out and solve the meta that it might be one of the lower power regions. But I definitely think that it was doing things that it shouldn't be able to do, because just the ability, like as somebody who literally was just a Zoe like abuser in all sorts of different decks, like just being able to like farm my opponent and be like, oh, that's it. Like being able to basically never fall behind in a region that's supposed to fall behind, because invoking is such a good late game kind of mechanic that I definitely think that in general, I like the changes, though I know that people disagree. And ultimately, like, we don't always know what's going to happen. And this is classic. Like, so many people have flamed me, and, part of my job is to just face tank stuff. So I guess I'm willing to face tank it. Ultimately, we don't always know where things are going to land, right? Like, we didn't know that, like, Watcher wouldn't be played at all. And I'm sure that somewhere was like, but Steve, didn't you read the card? Like, and it's like, it's not as easy as you think, especially when we're doing buffs. And, like, in this last patch, like, new cards were coming in literally 2 weeks after, like, we had a different expansion. So we don't always know. And, like, these tight windows we work in where it's like, oh, we get to, that big patch I did in literally, like, a week plus a day for, like, those 40 changes. It was, like, a crazy crunch. So, like, we're not always going to have the end result, and players think differently. So I don't know why I'm talking about this so much, but generally I think that the changes are to Targon were positive, and I would be surprised if we never saw it again. But that's the beauty of live design, is if we really like damage the game in a certain way, we can always come back. We can see what Bandle City has to offer Targon. We can say, oh, it's still not in a healthy spot. But yeah, I'm pretty sure. I mean, the Fangs is just busted.
That card was
broken.
insane. That card was so gross.
I just love. That's one of the reasons that I love playing Zoe Vi, is because I get to play aggro, control, and mid range all at the same time, and like just having some of the ballistic bot games where I'm just like super cool star chart, like I need to hit exactly space, or if I hit Moonglow, like get like literally I think I've killed somebody on like turn 4 or turn 5 with that deck sometimes.
all the celestial things.
But yeah, and it's definitely, I don't know. I feel we talked about it a lot, but that's where I'm at with it. Maybe we'll try to revisit it at some point. We did also try to buff the region in other ways. We buffed Tarek and Mountain Sojourners, because we said like here is like an identity of Targon that hasn't really been fully. And that's something that at least personally I've tried to instill on live design, is like we always want to give the player something back. And in this case, it's like, well, infinite healing and card advantage and like basically 0 mana Mystic Shot with, with other upsides with like gems and Pale Cascades with the Snake. It's just like, what can we give them instead? And we ended up landing on, okay, we're going to like give a huge buff to like Tarek and Mountain Sojourners to kind of allow the more supporty Targon playstyle to have its time to shine. So
yeah, which is nice. I mean, I can't really complain about it. I mean, I can and I will, but I asked for like huge sweeping changes to the game, and I got huge sweeping changes to the game, and it was really nice to have everything shaken up. Like, I love Targon mirrors, and I love the late game grindy and celestial crap. And I have more games on Zoe than I do on every other champion combined. Combined, yeah.
And also, just stuff happens. Like, it's not always because of a region. Like, for instance, like Zoe. Yeah, like her kit is like a little bit worse, but also like Making up off the 2, Young Witch is now a 1/2. Like there's like literal things that make Zoe worse that have nothing to do with the nerfs to Targon, right?
100%.
So it's definitely like I said before, it is just the most slippery slope. We can only see so much so far into the future, and like ultimately our goal with that change was to make Targon not be able to just
By
ignore
far the
all of
best.
its weaknesses, and I think we were successful in that. Yeah, I think the play rate is lower than we would like, so hopefully we can get that back up at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was curious about, so like, Targon came out, it was kind of OP, it got pushed back down, and now I feel like we're seeing it a little bit with Shurima now, seems to be the same region. Again, came out, they both kind of took like a second release of cards to pop off.
Right.
Is that sort of like, is that part of, because you don't want to release a bunch of new cards and then they just like they don't make a splash. Like that's not fun for anyone either, right? So is that kind of just part of the process of like, you push things a little bit, you hope it's not too much, but it's exciting, and then pull it back when you have to, kind of like these two regions, or does that just happen on its own?
Honestly, a lot of times it happens on its own, but we definitely have specific like items that, or sorry, like when I say item, I mean like either like a deck or a specific card, where we're definitely trying to push them, and we do keep into account like the releases where it's like, oh, and it's kind of interesting to see as a dev, like literally all players like talking about how bad Targon was when the first Targon set came out, and the same thing happened for Shurima
too. Yeah.
And then even within those patches, when players kind of like learned the entirely new play style of those regions, even sometimes before new cards were released, it was like, oh no, actually, this is OP. And I think that there's definitely a challenge, because when we release a region, this is why I'm excited about now that like Battle City is coming out, all of our regions are going to come out. So we don't have to worry about this anymore, but having to release a region, like when we release Shurima, I have no idea, but I want to say like Shurima was, when it was released, was probably like 50 or 60 cards, but like all other regions are like, 70 or 80, which means like, of course, statistically, and Shurima has the least champions, it's going to be not, of course, Shurima is going to be like the worst kind of region. So we have those questions of like, well, how do we make sure that this region is going to be seen? Because it's kind of funny, because when I see players talk about this, I see both the comments of like, this is too good right away, and this is too bad right away. So I don't think we actually ever solve that, because there's going to be two different takes, and sometimes the same people make both sides of that take, just to call out some people there, which is fine. I totally understand that as somebody who's played Magic for a long time, that it can be upsetting when like certain things are really pushed. But yeah, we definitely keep that into account when we're releasing stuff, where it's like, okay, what is this deck going to look like on this release? And then the next release, and then the next release, like, and what do we have to push or not push? But yeah, I would say that we do some planning, but a lot of the times it's like an accident. Like, we don't always know exactly how good a deck is going to be, and that's almost impossible to get right. I think that people have the impression that it is like, oh, Steve like is on the team, like he'll be able to figure it out, and it's just weird, because I think that what I like that we do is we're not actually afraid to push stuff, given that we can eventually nerf it.
Thank God.
And we're also not afraid to go the other way, where it's like, oh, like Jarvan is a lot, like a burst speed, like barrier challenger. We were like, oh, like surely this is like pretty good. Like we shipped it like a 5/3, like 4+ quest. And then after a few months, it's like, okay, actually, like we were wrong about how strong this was. Obviously it's a very niche, not even niche, but like a powerful effect we didn't have before. And sometimes even there's like the third thing, which is what happens, which is I almost call it like a buffer space, where there's like a card, there are cards that like we release that like in testing aren't so good, but I just assume that players are going to create a better version than us, like within hours of us releasing the set.
Could you give us an example?
Can I give us an example? I'm trying to think of one from recently. Stress testing is an interesting one. I mean, we definitely knew that like TF Fizz. It's funny because I've been a TF Fizz gamer from like when like all the NAB stuff wasn't nerfed. But stress testing, we definitely thought was going to be pretty strong. I think that we didn't expect it to borderline like break the game with the like turn the leveled up TF combo, because I feel like it's weird, because when we do dev testing, like I remember Riot Vriss like is one of our testers and on the gameplay analysis team, and he was doing a lot of the stress testing stuff, and like him just getting leveled up Twisted Fate, and me just being like, well, like it's development test.
Happen,
I
right?
didn't have like my removal spell, right?
Yeah.
Like right on turn 5, like otherwise. So, and then it's like, how many do we have? Like, we don't play that game 100 times. We play that game like twice, and people are probably like, that's not enough. But sorry, I might play against him like twice playing that deck.
Yeah.
He's going to be playing with his team a lot more, giving me feedback. And that's how something like that can happen, where it's like, yeah, this seems pretty strong, but we're not really sure. And like I said, pushing the envelope is important, especially for those champion expansions that are really only. I think the stress testing expansion was only like 15 cards, and
What's the Aphelios one, I believe.
The Aphelios expansion, which I worked on. So I'm pretty happy with how that went, even though there was some stuff we needed to change with the Viego expansion. Like it was only like 22 cards, and that really changed the meta, and there was a lot of new decks. So in general, I think we want to see our champions be splashy. But it's almost impossible to execute on because there's just like it happened with I think like Malphite recently and Talia, which were like champions that came a little under, and then we had to eventually buff them. There's just 60 champions in the game, and it's just like that. I don't. There might be more than that now with Bandle City, like 70 or something. I don't even know. There's so many champions, and you can only play so many in your deck. So we ultimately run into these situations where like we're not always going to get the balance exactly right.
Mm. I just like that we're able to you're able to like move it around. The flexibility is so nice. Like if something's busted, we know that it won't continue to be busted. And then like it's so I can't even like say how nice it is to have like life breathed into these archetypes that aren't quite doing it. You know? Like Lulu, Taric, like they weren't good enough, you couldn't really play them, and then like now all of a sudden you can play them. These are like real decks. And it's so nice to have that. It's so much better than just like, oh, this card sucks, I'll never play it, you know?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's fun, it's exciting.
Into the box you go.
Yeah, exactly. And it's exciting because not only does it open up like that champion or whatever, or that card, but it'll open up new archetypes, new playstyles, new decks, new region combinations, right, that you didn't get to play before. And that's just super exciting. But we are running out of time here. Don't want to keep you too much longer.
I got one. Okay, I got one last question.
Okay, last
so
one,
it's going to be. So now that like the last region's coming out, like this is new territory for us. Because I mean, there's always just been new regions to come out, and but now it's like done. Can you talk a little bit about like what it's going to look like? You know, maybe after that with like set releases, maybe with like timing. Is it like once a month or every other month? Like what? Like do we expect to get new cards? What do you want to share with us about sort of like what that looks like?
So I can
not to say no. Yeah,
I can. I mean, I can share whatever we have like already shared on our calendars, which I believe is just like the rest of this year, which includes like there's going to be 3 Bandle City expansions with 1 kind of extra expansion in there. I think is what we called it. And I don't know exactly what month, but it's definitely on our schedule. In terms of what we're doing in the future, I can't say exactly what we're doing, but I will say that it is new territory, which is exciting. Like we have a lot of options all of a sudden for like, hey, we can revisit everything we've done and like what has worked. Like do champion expansions work? Okay, yes or no? Like do small drops work? Do people want like the Rising Tides expansion, which was literally like all of Bilgewater at once, where everyone was like overwhelmed and was like, holy cow. So I will say that I can't specifically say what we're up to, but I have enjoyed a lot of the development conversations of like, what can we do now that we're not like carbon copying these regions in 3 releases over and over again?
Cool. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm super excited. Okay, sorry, last question. How far out, if you can answer, how far out do you guys work? Because you said like, okay, so you like the rest of the year kind of is planned out. So that's like maybe 6-ish months. What is it now? August? 4-ish months? Like how far into the future are you guys typically planning sets and releases and stuff?
Generally, it's actually let me think very specifically like what we're working on now. In general, we're working about from like a year and a half to a year or out. So you know, but it can be shrunk. Like for instance, I worked on the Viego Auction expansion. Is a little bit different since it was a small expansion, but I worked on that in I want to say like January to March this year. So yeah, anywhere between like 6 months to a year and a half out is generally where we're working. Though it's kind of one of those things that it can always be different, like a different person working on a different product. On game design, we tend to be working on things earlier. So like we're working on the development of the cards and we're playing with like, you know, blank cards and we're like putting like coding in like kind of prototypes for those cards that aren't always that work so well. And then, you know, we work with narrative and art to create like the stories for cards, and eventually they go on to art and realization and they add all the extra stuff onto the cards. So I will say that I think that the game designers on the team work the furthest out because we're like planning our next releases. We're planning like what kind of mechanics are coming up. But yeah, generally like anywhere from anywhere from 6 months to a year and a half, I guess, give or take. I realize that's kind of a big window, but
that's pretty wild.
No, that is wild. Because like it's funny for for you that's just like life, but for us we're all like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. Because like we just have what's in front of us like at the
game
day
hasn't
of.
even been out a year and a half yet.
Yeah, it's funny that y'all mentioned that because y'all know Nick, right? Nick Makes Plays.
Yeah,
of course.
Shout out. But yeah, him and I, he made me realize, like him personally kind of made me realize how much different timing feels from like the player perspective versus the dev perspective. Where it's like, oh, like, wait, you're saying we're not getting a balance patch for like a month or 2 months?
Do you know how long that is? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like,
forever.
I'm like sitting here trying to like,
Every day.
like in a week, like, stamp out this patch and make it like reasonable. And it's like, yeah. And then it like, things come up all of a sudden. Even Bandle City being released is like, wow, it's really coming out already. Though I think a lot of players feel that way since there's been so much content. But yeah, for instance, Shurima, I believe, was in development when we launched, when we officially launched, like when we launched Bilgewater.
Wow.
So
Beta.
yeah, it's pretty normal. But yeah, it's definitely one of those situations where, as a dev, it can really sneak up on you, like each release. But as a player, like it might feel like a long time when we're talking about like, oh, we're working on stuff like the set. Like I'm currently working on cards that are coming out like all of next year, so.
That's exciting, though. It's good to hear. It'd be really rough
Totally.
if you're like, well, I don't know if we have anything coming out.
It's actually another thing that I'd love to say about that is I love like you. We're always like reading like Twitter and like Reddit and like the official Discord, of course, and getting players like it's just so interesting to see a different perspective because I see all these players posting about how like X archetype like they clearly don't like control because of this like one card that was printed, and it's like. Yeah, I guess. But then I'm thinking about it, like, yeah, we made that card like a year and a half ago, and like I don't even know if like what decks existed then. So it's normally we do have plans where it's like, oh, this region might be good. Like Targon is good at like stalling the game and playing control or whatever. But in terms of like very specifically, like this card was clearly designed for something. Normally it's so far out that especially with these big releases where like we're getting 120 cards. It doesn't even seem right, but it seems like a lot of cards. Sorry, when I say it doesn't even seem right, I mean it just like sounds to me like a lot
of cards
from somebody who works on like 20 card expansions in the past. But yeah, it's definitely like pretty far out.
That's awesome.
That is cool.
That's really
cool to hear. It's funny. Okay, I'm not going to go into it. We're going to keep you here for too long.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll wrap it up there then. Rubin, thank you so much for coming on the show with us. It was an absolute pleasure to chat with you and pick your brain. And I hope we get to do it again sometime soon. And I think that'll be it for us. Big, any final words?
Nope, that's it.
All right, well,
Love
goodbye,
Targon.
everyone. Good luck tomorrow
Bye.
at Seasonals. Catch you later. Bye.
Good luck.
Thank you so much for listening to the Mastering Runeterra podcast with Jay and Bay. New episodes come out every Friday. If you haven't done so already, be sure to join us on Discord, check out the Patreon team, and have a look at our deck database on Twitter at Master Runeterra. Links to all of these can be found in the show notes and description.